Well, welcome this afternoon. This is quite a turnout, isn't it? We need a larger lecture hall. But I am so delighted to welcome all of you to this afternoon's Wyant Lecture. As you know, this Wyant Lecture Series is part of the endowed professorship that was a gift to us established by Louise Doherty Wyant, class of 1963, and her husband Jim Wyant, and they gave it to us in honor of Sister Anne Cyril Delaney. This afternoon, I especially welcome Nirupama Rao, Ambassador of India to the United States. Ambassador Rao has fulfilled many, many roles throughout her distinguished career, including diplomat, India's first woman High Commissioner to Sri Lanka as well. She was the first woman ambassador to China, and her latest role as ambassador to the United States. India is certainly a significant force in the international community, and growing more so almost every day. What a timely discussion we look forward to having with our ambassador. I know it will be very thought-provoking and insightful, so it's very much a pleasure to welcome you to our college this afternoon. But I'm going to invite Dr. Lenore Martin, our Louise Doherty Wyant professor, and a preeminent scholar in Middle Eastern studies, to actually do the real introduction of Ambassador Rao. One of the joys, of knowing Lenore Martin is that we have the opportunity to meet so many of her colleagues and friends. And so it's a special delight to invite Lenore to do the introduction. Lenore.
Thank you very much, Sister Janet. Thank you all for joining us. And I have an apology to my students and to my colleagues. I should have arranged for live streaming for this because we have a rock star ambassador here today. Before I introduce Ambassador Rao, first I'd like to give my special thanks to the Wyant family and to the Delaney and Dougherty families that are here. You can see how much the community appreciates everything you've been doing for us. And I have to say that all three families have been of great support and an inspiration, really, for us all. One last point before I do go forward with the introduction. For this lecture, the ambassador has been very kind, and her talk will be on the record, but the questions and answers will be off the record. That means that you cannot quote her question and answer discussion other than, without her permission. So just be aware of that as you move forward. It's an honor to introduce Her Excellency Nirupama Rao, the Ambassador of India to the United States. By choosing to speak on the role of India in the changing global landscape, the ambassador has quite the challenge before her. India is the largest democracy, the second most populous state in the world, and an economic powerhouse that continues to expand. With its growing population and growing economy, India is a presence all over the world. It is seeking resources and seeking and making investments. It is a technological wonder, and it is a cultural treasure. It is a nuclear-armed state with the third largest standing army in the world. It continues to try to raise more and more of its population out of poverty and to equalize education and opportunity throughout its borders. India today is a state much of the world looks to for input and for leadership. But our Wyant lecturer is more than up to the task of explaining India to the world and to this audience. She is a scholar, writer, poet, path-blazing, and superb diplomat. In short, she is an extremely dynamic woman representing an extremely dynamic country. The challenge for me is how to introduce a woman of so many talents and achievements in a few minutes. I had the good luck of meeting Ambassador Rao 20 years ago when she was a fellow at the Center for International Affairs at Harvard University. Since then, I've followed her around the world through phone and email, from her first ambassadorial posting in Peru and Bolivia to Russia when she was Deputy Chief of Mission, and back to the Ministry of External Affairs, where she served as its first woman spokesperson. She was then posted to Sri Lanka as the first woman High Commissioner for India. In 2006, she became India's first woman ambassador to China, one of India's most important diplomatic positions, and one for which she was very well prepared based on years of experience and study. She returned to the Ministry of External Affairs as Foreign Secretary, the highest post in the ministry. I have to say that I was very excited one evening when watching the news in Ankara, when I was there on sabbatical in the spring of 2010. I was watching the news very comfortably one evening, and there was the Indian Foreign Secretary, my friend Nirupama Rao, on TV. She was meeting her counterpart from Pakistan. It was a very important meeting, as it was the first time the two had met following the gruesome terrorist attacks in Mumbai that had taken the lives of 195 people. Once again, our speaker was making history, this time by trying to restart diplomatic engagement and begin to build trust where none existed. In truth, Ambassador Rao has been a strong proponent of building bridges throughout her diplomatic career, most especially where the challenges seem hardest. For example, the China-India relationship, where boundary and transboundary water issues are real and affect agriculture and people's livelihoods on both sides of the border. The China-Pakistan-India triangular relationship is of major concern as well, as it affects security issues such as the status of Kashmir, terrorism, and nuclear developments. Nevertheless, I can still remember a wonderful speech the ambassador sent to me from China, where her vision was of an increasingly engaged Chinese-Indian business community and people-to-people programs. For her, these were opportunities for building bridges to help address the contentious concerns between the two states. Ambassador Rao has used her scholarship to reach out to those of other cultures. I read a beautiful talk she wrote on the Indian writer and philosopher Tagore, the first non-Westerner to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature. The ambassador emphasized the enormous respect for the philosopher in China as a way of building cultural bridges between the two countries. As a high-profile woman, Ambassador Rao has found time to encourage the education of women in the social and hard sciences. In her talk to the first Indian Women's Science Congress, she refers to the saying that women hold up half the sky. And she praises the phenomenal growth of women in the sciences and engineering in India. But that is not enough for the ambassador, whose mother was a whose mother was a mathematician. See, I'm speaking. Whose mother was a mathematician and whose sister is a leading physician in India. She is encouraging women to continue to achieve positions of leadership in science and education. Ambassador Rao is also a poet and a writer. Her book of poems, Rain Rising, was published in 2004. That was the same year that, as High Commissioner of India to Sri Lanka, she wrote a beautiful essay on the human side of the tragic tsunami that took the lives of so many. With that beautiful, beautiful essay that she wrote, which I think, if the ambassador will allow us, we can post on our website, I cannot help but say that the ambassador was sharing her gift of writing and even more, her compassionate soul. So I'm very, very fortunate there to have the honor to turn the podium over to Her Excellency Nirupama Rao, our spring Wyant lecturer.
President of the Emmanuel College, Sister Janet Eisner, my dear friend, Professor Lenore Martin, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it is wonderful to be back in Boston, a city about which I have the most pleasant memories of youthful days spent in Harvard Square, a 4th of July spent watching fireworks on the banks of Charles River, the culture shock of a first visit to the late lamented original Filene's basement, and absorbing every impression of my first days in America. I'm therefore privileged to deliver the Wyant Lecture on India's role in the changing global landscape of the 21st century. This is indeed a privilege for me. I'm aware that I am addressing a very distinguished gathering of eminent people, and it is an honor to be speaking before you on a theme of such relevance and importance to India and indeed to the world. I believe that we approach the subject of this talk against the backdrop that is defined by India's unique identity as a pluralistic and diverse society, as a country defined not just by its regional situation, but more as one that is able to bridge divides, that respects diversity, that through its secular democratic traditions redefines conventional definitions of national power. India is a country. It is the world's largest democracy. It is also an enduring civilizational construct. As has been noted elsewhere, there is a legitimacy about India's strength, its ability to, I quote, bridge divides of interests and identities, unquote. These are strengths based on India's domestic experience. And there lies the power of the Indian example. Ever more than before, therefore, there is need for us to embrace the idea of India when change is upon us in our region and the world, geopolitically, economically, demographically. We live in an age of redefinitions. As the economic center of gravity has shifted towards the Indo-Pacific region, there has also been a concomitant shift in geopolitics towards that part of the world. The financial and economic crisis that started in 2008, from which the world has not yet recovered completely, has accelerated this pace of change in a dramatic manner. The core values that define India, the embrace of a diversity of opinions and outlook, the extraordinary mix of religions and cultural practices, the profusion of language, variations of climate and topography, and differences in levels of economic development, and flowing from all this, our respect for democratic traditions and multi-party democracy make us very much like the United States. Since the founding of our republic, we have consistently worked to strengthen our thriving, vibrant, and often noisy democracy with an electorate of more than 700 million people. With all their diversity, the people of India are united by a shared history and civilization sustained by a pluralist and secular democracy. The idea of India and its vision is not one of enforcing conformity, but of celebrating diversity. John Steinbeck once wrote of America, I quote, "Our land is of every kind, geologically and climatically, and our people are of every kind also, of every race, of every ethnic category, and yet our land is one nation, and our people are Americans," unquote. The inscription on your seal, E pluribus unum, or out of many one, is an idea which in my view is not dissimilar to the Indian ideal. We have in India taken the concept of unity in diversity to our hearts and made it the defining part of our lives. India today represents a unique model of development in the world. Our policy choices for development have been a product of a healthy debate resulting in a broad political consensus. Even though at times the pace of development might seem slow, the overall trend and direction remain clear. Indeed, as Larry Summers, former chairman of the National Economic Council, has noted, India's growth reflects the idea of a democratic, developmental state driven not by a mercantilist emphasis on exports, but a people-centered emphasis on growing levels of consumption and a widening middle class. And uniquely, India's emergence is not regarded as a threat, but rather welcomed by the vast majority of nations. 65 years into India's journey as a vibrant democracy, I would say that it is the Indian model of democratic governance, its acceptance of pluralism, its emphasis on inclusive, sustainable growth, together with its economic strength, resilience, and dynamism of its people, that propels the promise and the potential of India's role on the global stage. Additionally, we have always relied on diplomacy and statecraft in building relations and addressing problem issues, and have never been protagonists for the first use of force in settling outstanding problems. Let me turn to our economy. Our sustained economic growth, particularly in the last 2 decades, has led to a dramatic transformation in India. It has lifted millions of people out of poverty and led to the rise of a large middle class. Despite some slowdown in economic growth in the first half of 2011-12, which stood at 7.3% as against 8.5% in 2010-11, we have been able to keep the adverse impact of the global slowdown and uncertainty on our economy to the minimum. Notwithstanding this continuing uncertainty in the global economic situation, our economy is in some ways better placed than those of many other nations. India's resilience results from the fact that the bulk of India's GDP is domestic demand driven. There are other advantages too that India enjoys. These include a large young population. The median age in India is just over 25 years. There is a large pool of skilled workers that continues to expand, as it is estimated that annually more than 3 million graduates and 300,000 engineers join the workforce. This implies that over the next several decades, we would continue to see an expansion in our young workforce, which bodes well for India as we continue on our economic growth path. The Indian middle class, approximately around 300 million and growing, is fueling domestic consumption, which accounts for more than 60% of our GDP. But there still remain enormous development challenges. We need to create modern infrastructure and manufacturing capacities, improve agricultural productivity, ensure health, education, and the skill development of our population so as to benefit from our demographic assets and secure sustainable sources of energy to fuel our growth, and at the same time ensure that the fruits of development are accessed by all sections of our society. While the government has laid out ambitious policies to meet these challenges, there is another dimension too, in that these also represent an immense opportunity for our international partners to join in and benefit from our growth. For instance, India needs to invest an additional 3 to 4% of GDP on infrastructure, or about $1 trillion to sustain current levels of growth. Another developmental challenge is the interlinked issue of energy security and climate change. We have to address the shortfall in meeting our energy requirements. We are therefore working on a whole range of clean energy options, including solar energy, wind energy, nuclear energy, and clean coal technology, as well as energy efficiency. Also, we have committed to keep our per capita emissions below the average of those in the developed countries and to reduce the emissions intensity of India's GDP by 20 to 25% by 2020 as compared to 2005. We are also working with the international community to meet this challenge. With the United States, for example, we have established a joint center for clean energy research to encourage the development of affordable and reliable new technologies. The first awards for joint projects are going to be announced in a few weeks. 1 out of every 6 persons on our planet is Indian. If we are able to successfully tackle the developmental challenges and fulfill the priorities we have set for ourselves, the beneficial impact of that would register globally. Our vision is to harness the full potential of India as a knowledge power to alleviate poverty and illiteracy. And we will defend India's values of democracy, pluralism, and secularism from terrorism and jihadism with every fiber of our being. Let me now turn our searchlight outwards. Even as we pursue our national and developmental interests, we are also intensifying our engagement with the world. We have benefited from our integration into the global economy since the 1990s. This engagement is bound to grow as India actively pursues its interests in the world. What drives India's foreign policy? As for all countries, our foreign policy seeks to forge strategies that serve India's interest, protect its sovereignty and its security concerns, and promote its economic development. Our vision of a secular, pluralistic, and tolerant society within the country, embracing diversity of opinions and outlook, is sought to be articulated in our dealings with the world. India's global outlook and foreign policy is a reflection of the priorities that it has defined for itself as it seeks to develop, to be secure, to withstand external threats, to ensure that its national interests are not diluted by actions by hostile players in the global arena. A key feature of our foreign policy has always been our desire to retain our ability to make independent decisions in the best interests of our people. I believe also that there is a strong sense of realism and pragmatism that informs Indian foreign policy in our new century and is attached to the principles that have guided us in external relations since the early years of our republic. Globalization is breaking barriers between countries and regions, raising expectations in emergent economies as well as new power rivalries, and highlighting the compulsions of energy security, the need for unhindered growth and passage of trade between nations, and the growing capability of non-state actors outside any rule-based system. The power and the grasp of new technologies and their capacity to change the way we have conventionally defined security and national defense call for intelligent and creative responses in diplomacy in order to ensure secure and viable solutions. For the foreseeable future, our foremost national task is to ensure sustained economic growth so that we can provide opportunities to all of our citizens to realize their full potential. Our primary concern is to ensure a peaceful periphery and good relations with our neighbors. Our geography as a subcontinent must be transformed, as it has been said recently, into a geography of hope. With this, we also seek a balanced relationship with the major powers and a durable and equitable multilateral global order. India's stakes in a global and regional environment of peace, stability, and broader prosperity have never been higher. Today, as India's economic growth provides it more weight and adds to our influence in the international arena, we remain conscious that with this comes ever-increasing responsibility. Responsibility in weighing every move we make and positions we take with the realization that India is growingly one of the key players on the global stage today and will be called upon increasingly to deploy its potential in the interest of global peace and development. And buoyed by its sustainable economic growth, India is more willing and able to play a role commensurate with its size and destiny, whether in the United Nations Security Council or other multinational institutions such as the Group of 20. Our developmental partnerships with regions like Africa, and particularly with the least developed countries, are also of particular meaning and significance. The first sphere of our external engagement is quite naturally within our subcontinent and the enabling of a geography of hope. Domestically, we have since independence tried to pursue a policy of inclusive and equitable socioeconomic growth that empowers all our citizens and affords them opportunities to realize their full potential in a democratic manner. The policies that we seek to pursue in our neighborhood and beyond are based on this experience. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, has often said that the countries of the subcontinent have a shared destiny. Our effort, therefore, has been to create neighborhood partnerships so that our neighbors can benefit from India's growth. Our vision is to recreate the shared linkages, free flow of goods, peoples, and ideas that characterized our shared geographical space for our mutual benefit without wishing away the political realities that exist today. India's vision for the region calls for the development of a framework for shared economic prosperity embedded in habits of dialogue and cooperation. With its growing economy and expanding markets, India can and is willing to partner with other countries and play the role of an anchor for long-term peace, prosperity, and stability in our region. Developments in Afghanistan over the past few years have demonstrated the indivisibility of peace, security, and prosperity in our region. In this context, the future of Afghanistan and of Pakistan will have an important bearing for the future of South Asia's peoples, and therefore, India has a vital stake in their stability and their progress. With Pakistan, we are making earnest and committed efforts to build a peaceful, cooperative, and normal relationship, and to reduce the trust deficit that has blighted that relationship for so long. It is our hope and expectation that these efforts are not thwarted by the threat of terrorism that continues to emanate from within Pakistan and whose deadly impact is increasingly felt within that country also. In Afghanistan, we are working with the Afghan people as they try to build a stable, prosperous, and democratic country. We remain committed to Afghanistan's development, and this is reflected in the India-Afghanistan Strategic Partnership Agreement of 2011. Our $2 billion of assistance for Afghanistan's development, our support for building Afghan capacity for governance, security, and development, our efforts to improve its connectivity with the world, and our commitment to invest in Afghanistan's mining sector. We believe that Afghanistan's regional economic integration and the realization of its destiny as a hub for trade and connectivity in our region is important for the stability and prosperity of both that country and the wider region. We have supplemented our endeavors in Afghanistan with cooperative efforts with the United States to help vulnerable and marginalized groups, particularly women. We are also watching in this regard the current U.S. efforts to promote a political solution. It is necessary and crucial that such efforts ensure that we build and in no way regress on the gains achieved in the last decade in Afghanistan, as too much is at stake for the various sections of Afghan society and for peace and stability in our shared region. Looking beyond this immediate neighborhood, we have also been expanding our circles of engagement, starting with Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean region, West Asia, Central Asia, Africa, and the world's major powers. I have often said that Southeast Asia begins with Northeast India. Therefore, through our Look East policy enunciated in the early 90s, we have tried to reconnect and reach out in the civilizational space we share with our near neighbors in Southeast Asia. In the 2 decades since 1992, we have been able to increasingly promote processes of cooperation with Southeast and East Asia at the strategic, political, economic, cultural, and people-to-people levels. We are building on our strong bilateral ties, expanding our roles in regional organizations, and working to build comprehensive economic partnerships. And we are adding content to our economic relations with the region through growing strategic and security engagement. We have a stake in a stable, prosperous, and secure Indo-Pacific region, an objective that is shared by the United States too. We are therefore strengthening India-US consultations and coordination on developments in the region. And recently, we have expanded this process to include Japan as a partner in this dialogue. China is our largest neighbor. The rise of China is a reality that stands out across our regional landscape. We have challenges in our relationship, but also enormous opportunities for a mutually beneficial partnership at the bilateral and global levels. Over the last 2 decades, we have sought to deepen our dialogue and strengthen bilateral relations with China. Today, China is our largest trading partner in goods. Peace and tranquility have prevailed in the India-China border areas. We will continue to invest in a stable and cooperative relationship with China that is mutually beneficial and is also a source of regional stability and prosperity. We feel that there are a number of issues where India, China, and the United States can work together for our collective benefit, just as we are now beginning to do with Japan, trilaterally, that is. In this context, we believe that the US proposal for a trilateral dialogue between India, China, and the United States merits serious consideration. We firmly believe that our success, and indeed that of the larger international community, depends on our ability to use and to forge an inclusive architecture of economic integration and security cooperation for the Asia-Pacific, or the Indo-Pacific as it is increasingly being termed, so as to create a basis for a stable and prosperous Asia. In this regard, we welcome the fact that issues such as terrorism, prevention and response to natural disasters, piracy, protection of sea lanes of communication, and anti-drug trafficking are also being discussed in the East Asia Summit. These are the challenges that cut across national boundaries and require cooperative responses. Within the region, there is increasing global attention on maritime security, and in that context, on the Indian Ocean, which is central to India's economy and its security. When the map of our region is viewed upwards from the perspective of the ocean that surrounds peninsular India, you will see that India's future destiny is in many ways defined by its maritime interests. India does not want to see this ocean emerge as a contested common or remain vulnerable to natural disasters, piracy, or instability in coastal or littoral states. We in India want to see the Indian Ocean region develop into a zone of cooperation rather than of competition and of domination. We support a dialogue among all stakeholders based on an affirmation of the principles of the freedom of navigation, unimpeded commerce, and peaceful settlement of maritime disputes in accordance with international law. For this reason, we not only have robust bilateral economic and security relationships in the region, but work through regional initiatives like the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium and the Indian Ocean Rim Association of Regional Cooperation. This is also an area of growing importance and relevance in the India-US relationship. We have been witnessing unprecedented developments in West Asia, or the Middle East as it's called here. As a democracy, India is of the firm belief that people of all countries have the right to choose their own destiny and shape their own future as they deem fit. For us, the region is of immense importance. Not only do we have civilizational links with that region, but it is also home to about 6 million Indians whose welfare is a matter of high priority. It is a region that accounts for more than 2/3 of our petroleum imports, contributes over $100 billion in export markets, and $40 billion in remittances. We have therefore immense stakes in the peace and stability of this region. This is an objective that we share with the broader international community as well. Indeed, we have enhanced our bilateral consultations with the United States to exchange perspectives on the changes underway and to enhance mutual understanding. Even though we might have differences on some tactical approaches, there is overall agreement on the long-term objective that people's aspirations in these countries must be respected. As a freedom-loving people committed to the secular ideals of our founding fathers, our hope is that the secular democratic spirit that we saw blooming at the outset of the Arab Spring early last year does not dissipate to be overcome by extreme ideologies. I'd like to say a few words about Iran in this regard. We have consistently said in India that Iran must cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, to resolve all outstanding issues about its nuclear program that continue to raise doubts in the minds of the international community. We appreciate that Iran has a right to utilize the benefits of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, but this right has to be exercised in conformity with international obligations that a state has taken. And Iran, as a non-nuclear weapon state, party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, has certain obligations that it must comply with fully and transparently. But we also hope that these issues are resolved peacefully. As some observers have noted, what we need is diplomatic drive and creativity more than ever to address the situation. The talk of war will not help a solution and only erodes global cohesion. As a near neighbor and our only surface access to Central Asia and Afghanistan, engagement with Iran is of relevance and meaning to us. And even as our imports of Iranian crude continue to decline and are currently under 10% of our overall oil imports, it does constitute a significant share of our oil imports. We do believe that our relationship with Iran is neither inconsistent with our non-proliferation objectives, nor is it in contradiction with the relationships that we have with our friends in West Asia or with the United States. Indeed, our relationship with the United States is in fact built on our shared values and converging interests. It is based on our fundamental belief that we have mutually beneficial stakes in each other's success. We have in the last decade set up a comprehensive architecture of engagement based on broad political support in each of our countries, strong people-to-people linkages, and a growing habit of cooperation. Over the past 10 years, the two governments have put in place a very robust agenda for cooperation in our partnership that is, to quote Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, founded on both principles and pragmatism. As the late K. Subramaniam, the doyen of India's strategic thinkers, said, This relationship should not be measured by the number of successful transactions. He said presciently that the relationship must be assessed on its progress in setting up structures that make it more effective in countering the challenges of the 21st century. Global governance must rely upon networks of bilateral strategic partnerships among democratic powers such as ours that manage rather than impose outcomes and provide a powerful response to the challenges they face, unquote. In the months ahead, as we plan for the third meeting of the strategic dialogue between our two countries in Washington, it would be our joint endeavor to build on this foundation, consolidate the work that has already been done, and to implement the initiatives that have been agreed upon to qualitatively improve the relationship. Indeed, in India, we attach importance to our strategic partnership with the United States, both for advancing global peace, stability, and progress, as well as in the pursuit of India's national development goals, including promoting better education opportunities, improving agricultural productivity, creating a world-class infrastructure, and the development of sustainable energy resources. I have no doubt that our strategic partnership will intensify further, both in the bilateral context and on regional issues. We are on the same side when it comes to eliminating those forces that threaten the freedom of our democracies and the safety and well-being of our peoples and hinder our development. To conclude, may I reiterate that India will continue to be a responsible member of the international community and will play its legitimate role on the global stage, a role that is commensurate with its size, its growing economic strength, its proven capacity to manage its enormous diversity within a democratic polity, and its lasting contributions to global peace and security. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Rao was convincing me that I should be shifting from West Asia to Asia, you see, in my study. Lindsay, would you like to, I think Lindsay's going to make a presentation on behalf of the flowers? Oh, yeah.
I'd like to thank Ambassador Rao for coming and sharing her unique insights on the growing role of India in the global community. I know that my fellow students and our guests have very much enjoyed hearing your speech.
Thank you very much. And I would like to add a special thank you and hope that Emmanuel College faculty and students have a chance to have a very, not only, let's just say, a much closer relationship. And there's so much to learn and so much to appreciate. Thank you for opening the door. Thank you very much. Please join us at the Fenway Room. We have lots of goodies and lots of chance to speak to Ambassador Rao. And I'll have